Before we begin, take a deep breath and let the noise of the day slowly fade. Unclench your jaw, soften your eyes, and let the weight of modern life melt away. Tonight, we're not chasing action or drama. We're wandering into the forgotten corridors of boring history, where medieval echoes linger and dark tales unfold like fading ink on parchment. Welcome to Midnight Sleepless, a resting place for tired minds, where the Middle Ages, ancient empires, and strange dark history stories drift by like soft clouds. Here, knights, castles, and quiet empires return not with a roar, but with a whisper. Let me know in the comments, where in the world are you listening from, and what time is it there? And if you enjoy these slow, sleepy journeys through medieval times, boring facts, and forgotten worlds, a gentle tap on the subscribe button helps keep this calm storytelling alive. Now, let the story begin. The air inside the House of Life is still, not with neglect, but with intention. Its silence is soft and layered, as though it is gathered over centuries, thickened by the breath of scribes and the murmur of sacred words spoken in half-light. This is not a place of crowds or movement. This is where the scrolls sleep carefully rolled, wrapped in linen, and stored in niches carved into thick mud brick walls. The temperature remains constant here, cooled by shadow and stone, warmed by bodies that move with purpose, but without haste. You enter barefoot, as is customary. The smooth stone floor is cool beneath your soles, and the scent that greets you is complex and quiet. Old papyrus, faint resin from cedar boxes, the dust of dried ink, and something older, perhaps the musk of time itself. This is the archive, the sacred library, the whispering vault of memory. Known simply as Per Engting, the House of Life. Your basket is light today. It holds a single scroll, newly completed, dried, and inspected, bearing a record of offerings to a lesser-known temple deity in the southern gnomes. It is not a grand scroll, not one that will be read in court or carried by emissaries, but it matters, 'cause every offering matters, and every god, however obscure, deserves remembrance. A senior scribe greets you with a slight nod. His hair is streaked with gray, and his hands are permanently stained with ink black in the creases, red at the fingertips. He gestures toward a shelf 3 rows above the floor, marked by a faint hieratic sign denoting the district and temple. You climb a short ladder, careful not to disturb the scrolls beside it. Each rests in its own sleeve of linen or papyrus fiber, labeled in ink and tied with narrow cords. You place the new scroll gently beside the others. It joins them without fanfare, without proclamation. Quiet addition to a long, silent lineage of records. You linger for a moment, your hand resting near its edge, feeling the residual warmth of your own labor. Around you, the scrolled room stretches in measured rose walls lined with shallow niches, low wooden shelves, and occasional boxes of cedar or sycamore. There is no clutter, noise, only a sense of continuity. Each scroll holds a thread in the vast, woven fabric of Egypt's memory. The categories are many: hymns, tax records, cultural yields, temple accounts, royal decrees, star charts, medical papyri, names of the newly born, names of the newly dead, each assigned a place, each marked in steady hands. Some scrolls are more than a century-old papyrus, faded to pale straw, ink cracked faintly with time. Yet the words endure. The fibers hold them still, suspended between one breath and the next. You walk slowly between the shelves, your fingers trailing near but never touching. The naming glyphs catch the light faint traces of red and black dancing in the lamplight. A scribe nearby replaces a scroll with deliberate care, his every motion a quiet ritual. He straightens the linen band. He brushes away a mote of dust. He steps back and exhales. This reverence is not about grandeur. It is about trust. The scrolls are trusted to stay, to remember when men forget. to speak when no one else remains. You sit briefly near the center of the room, on a low stone bench beside a column carved with the figure of Thoth. His ibis head tilts downward as if reading. The wall behind him is etched with phrases from the instructions of a minimum advice to scribes, to the patient, to the quiet-minded. The ink may have faded, but the carvings remain, soft and sure beneath your hand. The air carries the scent of dried papyrus and old linen. Somewhere, someone grinds ink in a distant chamber, and the faint smell of soot and gum arabic drifts in like memory. Time moves differently here, slower, deeper. You do not feel it passing in minutes or hours, but in breaths, in a soft rustle of linen, in the settling of dust. You rise and walk once more along the wall, where scrolls stored decades ago still sleep, wrapped in names you do not know, recording moments you will never see. Yet, their presence is enough. It reminds you that writing is not only about message, but about preservation. Not only for the living, but for the unborn. Tomorrow, more scrolls will arrive. Some will be copied. Some will be stored. Some will be read aloud in rituals. Others will remain untouched, unread, for years, perhaps centuries. That, too, is their role, to wait, to be ready. And so, the house of life continues, not loud, not quick, but certain. A sanctuary, not of stone or wealth, but of words. The room changes subtly as the day deepens. The shafts of light through the high slits in the stone walls shift, falling in softer angles now, brushing gently against the edges of scrolls, wrapped in linen and marked with the red ink of sacred words. Stirred only by motion, drifts like threads of gold in the still air. The temperature cools slightly, but the scent remains, steady aged fiber, faint resin, and the subtle sweetness of ancient ink. Your task this afternoon is not to deliver, but to assist in the preservation. A scroll has been found, with mold along its lower edge, its papyrus curling faintly from damp air in a corner near the outer wall. It is not a dramatic decay, just the beginning, but the scribes of the house of life do not wait for damage to grow. Every sheet, every thread, every line is a thread in a long cloth of Egypt's memory. You sit at a low cedar table in the back room and annex to the main archive. The damaged scroll is unrolled gently, and beneath your hands, the ancient fibers feel delicate yet steady. Like the skin of a dried fig, the ink is still legible red headings, marking a sequence of agricultural forecasts from a generation past, and black lines carefully listing dates, flood levels, harvest weights, and temple offerings. You can picture the scribe who once copied these columns, his posture bent, his palette resting by his knee, his pen stained to the knuckle. You feel no need to know his name. The scroll is enough. His work endures. A senior scribe prepares a salve made from powdered natron and diluted resin. You watch as he applies it with the tip of a soft, brushy stroke, a whisper. He does not hurry. The scroll receives the care of a patient, not an object. As he works, he murmurs a short passage from the book of the scribe. The hand that writes guards the name. The ink that dries binds the day to the next. You repeat the words in your mind as you assist, gently lifting the scroll to reposition it, offering a fresh cloth for blotting. You note the smell of the resin sharp at first, then mellow, mingling with the scent of dried papyrus and the cedar of the table. It lingers in the air, faintly medicinal, faintly earthy. Once treated, the scroll is laid flat between two weighted panels of polished wood, its surface lined with linen to keep the fibers even. It will stay there for several days, drying and regaining its shape before being returned to its shelf. A small tag is added, the name of the document, the date of treatment, the initials of the scribes who handled it. You sign your mark, just a symbol, one you've practiced many times, assigned to you when you began your training. Not a name, it's just a trace, As you clean the tools, the elder scribe shares a quiet reflection. It tells you of a scroll discovered in a collapsed storeroom after a flood years ago. It was thought lost, its box shattered, its fibers swollen and fused, but they restored it over weeks, slowly, page by page. And inside, they found a forgotten hymn to Khonsu, god of the moon, written in a hand no one recognized. It had not been copied in any other archive. It might have vanished forever. That, he says, is why we preserve. Not to protect what is already known, but to protect what is still waiting to be remembered. You nod silently, placing the cleaned brush back into its case. The room around you feels unchanged, and yet, somehow, more alive. Every shelf, every niche, every labeled box seems to breathe not audibly, but in presence, in purpose. Later, you're asked to perform an inventory of a lesser-used alcove. You kneel on a reed mat and gently unroll a series of scrolls, checking their seals, verifying dates, wiping away the finest dust with a dry cloth. Some scrolls are wrapped in dark linen, their ties untouched for decades. Others have faded glitz at their margins, marking them as copies of copies. Your fingers move with reverence. Each scroll is a thread pulled taut between past and present, a voice captured in fiber and pigment. One scroll catches your Ajah's short treatise on counting oxen and measuring barley. Copied during the reign of a king long dead, the ink is still bold. The handwriting firm, deliberate, carries confidence. At the bottom, in the margin, a faint line added by another hand, a correction in red, and beside it, a comment in lighter black ink. Playful and wry, you smile. Even among records, there is life. The scribes were people. They made jokes. They shared the scrolls. Their touch lingers. When the inventory is complete, you roll the scrolls back into their sleeves and secure them gently. The room returns to silence. The light fades to gold. And you breathe in the weight of a space, not heavy, but full. Full of unseen stories, resting just beneath the surface. You sit quietly before leaving, watching the light move across the floor. Somewhere far above, a pigeon coos softly from a temple window. You do not feel rushed. The day is not finished, but it is full. In the house of life, time moves differently. Not forward, not back, but inward, spiraling gently into the careful hands of those who listen, who write, who preserve. The sun has slipped below the temple roofs now, leaving behind only the gentlest residue of light, pale and honeyed, filtering down the high walls of the house of life in narrow ribbons. The air is still, save for the soft flutter of linen curtains stirred by the evening breeze. The scrolls sleep in their niches, undisturbed, nestled like resting birds in cubbyholes of mud brick and cedar. Their presence is quiet but unshakable, a low pulse beneath the daily breath of the temple. You finish the final task of the day, cataloging a set of scrolls recently transferred from another temple in a nearby nome. Each bears the neat handwriting of a scribe you've never met, yet whose spacing, inkstroke, and flourishes feel familiar, almost intimate. One scroll, in particular, catches your attention, not because of its subject, but because of the care with which it's been prepared. The papyrus is finely polished, its linen wrap soft and faintly fragrant, and ink, though faded, is so evenly applied that it appears almost printed. It is a record of grain offerings, signed with a symbol you recognize from your early days as an apprentice, a teacher's teacher, perhaps. A link in the long, unbroken chain. You place it on the shelf gently beside others in its category. Then, for a moment, you allow yourself stillness. Not because the work is done, never truly is, but because the room invites you to pause. The house of life is not only a vault of knowledge, it is a place of breathing, of remembering, of resting. There is no music here, no grand statue to bow before, Only this, scrolls, shelves, dust, and the faint scent of ink that has dried for centuries. And yet, within these walls is a kind of sacredness deeper than ritual. For here, even the ordinary is held in reverence. A barley ledger, a tax list, a birth record, a note from one scribe to another. No story is too small, no voice unworthy of preservation. You walk slowly past the rows of niches, trailing your fingers near their edge, not to touch, but to feel the nearness. Each scroll is silent, but not asleep. They are waiting, listening, carrying their messages forward across generations, across reigns, across time itself. A soft chime sounds from the far end of the archive, a polished bronze bell rung by a senior librarian at day's end. Its tone is low, mellow, and fading, a final breath. You bow your head briefly, then begin to gather your tools. The linen gloves are folded. The brushes returned to their case. Your basket is empty now, no scrolls. To carry only the quiet weight of the day resting in your limbs. As you move toward the exit, the corridor ahead glows with lamplight. A young novice passes you, carrying a scroll to be sealed in wax and delivered before morning. His steps are quick, his eyes wide with the energy of learning. You step aside for him, offer a nod, and watch as he disappears around the corner. And in that small motion, something familiar stirs. You were him once, still are, in many ways. Outside, the sky has turned the color of wet clay, streaked faintly with indigo. A single ibis flies low over the temple roof, its wings wide and deliberate. You pause at the threshold of the house of life and glance back one last time. The scroll room glows dimly within, quiet as a breath held in sleep. You think of all that. The archive contains not treasures in the usual sense, not gold or jewels or relics, but knowledge, stillness, a record of lives lived quietly, tasks done faithfully, prayers whispered without witness. You wonder how many scribes' hands have moved like yours, cleaning, copying, storing. You wonder if your name will be remembered. Then you let the thought drift, like a reed boat turned loose on the Nile. What matters is not whether your name is read. What matters is that the record remains. You step into the evening air. The stones beneath your feet are still warm from the sun. A breeze carries the mingled scent of river and red, of dust and dry flowers. Above, the first stars begin to blink into view, silent watchers over a world that, for all its changes, still remembers. And as you walk homeward, your basket light, your hands stained faintly with ink, you carry with you not scrolls, but the rhythm of the archive, the hush between steps, the breath before writing, the certainty that even in silence, something has been preserved. There is a kind of beauty that lives in lines, not bold or elaborate, but soft, intentional like water, following the grooves of a riverbed worn by centuries. This is the beauty of ancient Egyptian handwriting. It's not the carved majesty of hieroglyphs, etched in stone, but the living, flowing ink of papyrus, the kind that moves with breath, the kind shaped by the wrist, the shoulder, the gentle pause of a scribe in mid-stroke today. You sit at a reed mat in a quiet schoolroom within a temple complex, a low board across your lap, and in your hand, a reed pen shaped with careful care. The ink is prepared. The papyrus lies smooth and slightly fibrous beneath your fingers. In the lie you will practice, though short's part of a tradition, thousands of years in the making. Your instructor stands nearby, his palette resting in the crook of his arm. He speaks little. Instead, he writes one symbol after another. First in the formal pictorial hieroglyphs, then again in the more fluid, compact form known as hieratic. It is this second script you are learning now. Less rigid, more human. Not meant for carving, but for copying, for speed, for thought. Hieroglyphs are ceremonial, used in tombs, monuments, temple walls. Each one a tiny picture, a vulture, a loaf of bread, a seated god. Beautiful, yes, precise, eternal, but they are not suited for the pace of daily life. It's for ledges, letters, hymns to be copied again and again. For those, the Egyptians developed something quieter, more intimate. Hierratic. Your pen touches the page. You begin with a simple line, perhaps the sign for life, a graceful loop that curves like a sprouting reed. Then the sign for house, square and steady, simplified from its more ornate cousin. The forms are reduced, yes, but not diminished. They carry the same meaning, the same rhythm, and when strung together in a steady hand, they speak with clarity, even when they no longer resemble their stone-carved origins. The room around you is silent but alive. Other students work beside you, their boards tilted, their heads bowed. The sound of reed pens moving across papyrus is steady and soft like wind brushing over dry grass. An older scribe moves slowly down the line, correcting posture, adjusting the angle of a pen, straightening a back. His footsteps are bare, the soles of his feet whispering across the reed mat. You pause between lines to study the difference between the two scripts. On the page before you, your teacher has written the word NFR, beautiful. In hieroglyphs, it is made of 3 symbols, a windpipe and heart joined with a ripple of water. Intricate, symbolic, requiring care to carve. But in hieratic, it is rendered in a flowing motion, the signs compressed into strokes that curve and taper like flowing water. The sound is the same, the meaning unchanged. But the visual rhythm is altered. More breath, less structure. Your instructor points to the hieratic form and nods once. You begin to copy it. As your hand moves, you begin to feel the rhythm shift. Each word becomes less a picture and more a movement. The language moves from your mind to the page, not as a string of images, but as a current. Hieratic writing flows not in a straight line, but in the quiet arc of muscle and thought. The ink dries quickly on the papyrus. You watch it darken and settle, the lines crisp but never harsh. The black pigment soot, gum, and water sits atop the fibers like soft threads stitched into linen. There is no need to blot. You simply pause, let the ink breathe. You begin another word, then another. A phrase now. Your instructor corrects one of your loops with a soft tap. Too tight. Hurried. He shows you again, and you copy slowly, your hand calming, your wrist loosening. Outside, the wind shifts the tamarisk trees, and their shadows dance across the stone floor. A dove calls from a nearby perch, and the air smells faintly of chalk and sun-warmed ink. You glance down at your work. The lines are better now, still learning, but steadier. They move with the pace of thought, not the rush of effort. It's easy to forget, in the stillness, that this script so soft, so flowing was once used to compose prayers, contracts, treaties, and dreams. That this simple reed pen was the bridge between voice and permanence, between the passing moment and what endures. And you, with ink on your fingers and the faint cramp in your hand, are now part of that long, quiet story. The afternoon settles softly around you as you continue your practice of hieratic script. The gentle scratch of reed pen on papyrus, the only sound accompanying your steady breath. The sun has moved high, but inside the scriptorium, the light is filtered through woven mats hung in narrow windows, casting muted, shifting patterns on the stone floor and the wooden desks. The air carries the faint aroma of crushed acacia and old ink, blending with the dry earth scent that seems to linger in every corner of this ancient place. Your hand moves with increasing confidence, tracing the simplified curves and loops of hieratic signs. Each stroke flows into the next like a gentle current, a silent conversation between mind and body. You feel the slight resistance of the papyrus beneath your pen's tip. The texture, soft yet firm, reminding you of woven linen or the delicate bark of a tree. Beside you, other students copy lines of text, lists of offerings, names of gods, fragments of hymns, their faces calm, focused. The master scribe moves slowly among them, his eyes keen but kind, stopping now and then to adjust a wrist or offer a quiet word of encouragement. His voice is soft, never raised, blending into the rhythm of the room like a steady heartbeat. You watch his hand demonstrate a difficult ligature, the joining of two signs into one fluid movement. He reminds you that hieratic was born from the need to write quickly, to record the everyday without losing the beauty of the language. It is less formal than hieroglyphs, yes, but no less important. It carries the pulse of life, the breath of commerce, the quiet prayers of households. Between copying, lift your gaze to the walls, where faded murals depict scribes at work, scrolls unrolled, palettes open, reeds poised. The painted figures move with grace and purpose, their eyes fixed on their task, their fingers steady. You feel a kinship with them, as if you and they share a bond that stretches across centuries. The master scribe encourages you to memorize the shapes, not merely copy them. Let the signs become second nature, like the flow of water or the movement of wind through reeds. You recite the names of signs softly to yourself, tracing invisible lines in the air, feeling the curves and angles with your fingers as much as with your eyes. The afternoon grows late. The scent of crushed figs from a nearby basket drifts faintly, mixing with the earthy notes of ink and dust. You pause to rest your hand, feeling the warmth of the sun slipping through the window and settling on your skin like a gentle balm. Your breath slows, your thoughts soften. You reflect on the path from hieroglyphs to hieratica, path from the carved stone to the living word, from permanence to the moment's record. It is a story of adaptation, of quiet evolution, of human hand-shaping language, not only for the gods, but for daily life, for trade, for memory. The ink on your papyrus dries to a matte black, steady and true. You fold your sheet carefully, mindful of its weight and texture, and prepared to store it among other silent testimonies to your steady learning, your soft dedication. Outside, the temple bells toll faintly, calling the faithful to evening prayer. The world beyond waits, but here in this quiet scriptorium, time bends gently, measured not in hours, but in the slow, deliberate movement of ink and reed. As the day fades into evening, the scriptorium settles into a hushed calm. The last rays of sunlight filter softly through the narrow windows, painting warm, golden bands across worn stone floors and the scattered tools of your craft. The faint scent of drying ink mingles with the coolness of shaded walls, subtle reminder of the day's gentle labors. You sit quietly, your hands resting in your lap, fingers still tinged faintly with ink's residue. The parchment you've filled with flowing hieratic lines lies before you, a modest testament to hours of patient repetition and quiet focus. Each stroke holds the weight of tradition and the promise of memory, woven into the fibers of papyrus like a whispered song. Your thoughts drift to the long line of scribes who came before, their steady hands tracing these same signs, their breath steady with the rhythm of writing. Not kings or priests, but those who shaped the quiet backbone of a civilization, keepers of accounts, recorders of daily offerings, chroniclers of time's gentle passing. Their names may be lost, but their work endures in the slow dance of ink and reed. You recall the contrast between the carved grandeur of hieroglyphs and the supple flow of hieratic, one eternal in stone, the other living in ink, moving with the hand and the moment. Both forms tell stories, one monumental, the other intimate. Together, they hold the balance of memory and expression. A gentle breeze stirs the reed mat beneath you. Outside, the river murmurs softly, carrying light on its surface as stars begin to shimmer overhead. The ibis, sacred to Thoth, glides silently in the cool air, a guardian of knowledge and quiet. Wisdom taught you breathe deeply, feeling the slow pulse of stillness settle over your mind and body. The day's work is done, and in this moment, you are connected to past scribes, to the sacred script, and to the unbroken thread of time carried forward in every carefully drawn line. The ink has dried. The reed rests beside you, and the papyrus awaits its next touch. Tomorrow will bring more lessons, more quiet hours, more gentle strokes, and through them all, the story will continue written, not in stone alone, but in the flowing script of living hands. You close your eyes, carried softly toward rest by the enduring rhythm of ink and memory before the reed pen ever touched papyrus. Before the ink dried into delicate lines, the ancient scribes learned in a world filled with voices. The temples and schools were not only places of quiet writing, but of listening, where knowledge flowed from master to pupil in stories, chants, and steady recitations. This was a tradition older than script itself, where the spoken word held power and memory was shaped by sound. You find yourself seated cross-legged beneath a tall sycamore tree, its leaves whispering softly in the breeze. The air is warm, scented, faintly with dust, crushed herbs, and the sweetness of ripened figs. Around you, other students gather, their faces calm and attentive. In the center, an elder scribe's voice rises gently, measured and low. He speaks not with hurry, but with care, each word a note in a quiet song. The lessons here begin with listening. Long lists of signs, sounds, and sacred names flow from his lips. The rhythm is steady, a slow cadence like the river itself. Names of gods, titles of officials, words for grain and water, phrases of greeting and prayer. They are spoken again and again, folded into the memory like a soft cloth wrapping a fragile gift. You close your eyes as you listen, feeling the syllables press softly against your mind. The sounds are ancient and deep, flowing over you like warm water. The voice does not shout or command, but invites a gentle current, guiding you toward understanding. You repeat this sound silently, tasting each one, feeling the shape of them on your tongue. When the chanting pauses, the elder scribe gestures to the palm of his hand, where a series of signs are drawn in charcoal. He shows how the spoken sounds correspond to the symbols you will soon learn to write. The connection between voice and script is delicate, like the weaving of reeds into papyrus, separate strands forming one whole. Your own voice joins the others now, softly, hesitantly. At first, then growing stronger with each repetition, the words begin to form a pattern, a quiet dance of sound and meaning, rhythm and symbol. You realize that learning to write is not simply a matter of copying marks on a page, but of feeling language pulse in your own breath. Nearby, a breeze stirs the dust and carries the distant sound of temple bells. A dove calls softly from a ledge above. The world feels still, suspended in this moment of shared learning and quiet reverence. The elder scribe's voice returns, steady and patient, weaving the words once more. You listen, and you remember not just the shapes of letters, but the song of your people, carried from mouth to ear, from hand to pen. Across the ages, the lessons beneath the sycamore continue as the sun climbs higher, its warmth filtering through the leaves and casting shifting patterns on the stone floor of the temple courtyard. The gentle murmur of voices rises and falls like the ebb and flow of the Nile, a quiet harmony that weaves itself into the fabric of your memory. Each word, each syllable, spoken by the elder scribe, carries the weight of centuries, a living link to the past, preserved not on papyrus, but in the very breath of those who learn. Your companions sit nearby, their eyes closed or focused intently as they repeat the phrases. Some speak softly under their breath, others chant aloud, their tones blending in a steady, soothing rhythm. You join in, feeling the vibration of the sounds in your chest, the subtle rise and fall of your own voice merging with theirs. It is not a race or a test, but a shared journey, a slow unfolding of understanding. The elder scribe moves among you. His presence, calm and steady. The key corrects gently, adjusting the pitch of a word here, the pacing of a phrase there. His hands, worn and steady, demonstrate the subtle inflections that give meaning to the language. A rising tone that signals a question, a softening of consonants to convey reverence. You watch the careful articulation, sensing that language is more than words. It is music, gesture, and feeling intertwined. Between lessons, you pause to trace invisible signs in the air with your fingers, practicing the flow of hieratic script even before your pen touches papyrus. The movement feels natural, like water, running over smooth stones. You begin to understand that the written word is a shadow of the spoken, a way to hold sound still, to carry it forward beyond the limits of memory that around you. The temple breathes. The scent of incense coils lazily from the sanctuary. The soft rustling of palm fronds accompanies the distant call of birds. You feel the heat of the sun on your skin, tempered by the shade of the sycamore and the cool touch of stone beneath you. The world is quiet, but alive, a gentle cradle for the lessons of voice and script. As the afternoon deepens, the elder scribe shares a story, not written, but spoken, of a great scribe who once learned by listening beneath the stars. His memory so keen that he could recite entire scrolls from a single hearing. This tale is told not with excitement, but as a whisper, a reminder of the power and patience required to carry knowledge forward. You close your eyes briefly, letting the cadence of the voice and the softness of the moment wash over you. The words settle like seeds in fertile soil, ready to grow into understanding with time and care. When the lesson ends, you and your companions rise slowly, the quiet satisfaction of learning settling over you like a soft cloak. You gather your mats and tools. It's a familiar scent of ink and papyrus, greeting you like an old friend as you walk back through the temple halls. The fading light casts long shadows. You carry with you not just shapes and signs, but the echo of voices, the gentle pulse of an oral tradition that holds you in its calm embrace, guiding your hand toward the next step in the endless story of writing. As the temple settles into twilight, a calm hush envelops the spaces where knowledge has been shared, not just through ink and reed, but through voice and breath. The soft murmur of prayers fades. The distant calls of evening birds echo gently through stone corridors, and the fading light pools like liquid gold on carved pillars. In this quiet, the lessons of the day linger, lessons carried not only on papyrus, but in memory, in the steady cadence of the spoken word. You sit quietly beneath the sycamore tree once more. Your companions scattered nearby, some resting, others tracing patterns in the dust with their fingers. The air is cool now, carrying faint scents of crushed herbs and the faint smoke of extinguished lamps. The sky above deepens to a velvet blue, scattered with stars, blinking softly, silent witnesses to the endless flow of time. Your mind turns gently to the voices you have heard today, the elder scribe's patient tone, the rhythmic chants of your peers, the whispered sounds that once carried history, law, and lore before the age of writing. These voices weave an unbroken thread from one generation to the next, a living river of knowledge flowing through the calm of centuries. You think of how writing was born, not as a sudden spark, but as a slow, unfolding speech, given form, sound, captured in ink. The script you have begun to learn flows from the rhythm of these voices, shaped by breath, memory, and the gentle passage of time. It is a bridge between worlds, the ephemeral and the eternal. In this moment of stillness, you Sense the weight of what it means to listen, to learn, to carry forward stories, both large and small. The sacred names of gods, the lists of grain, the simple proverbs whispered in the darkle find their place in this unfolding tapestry. And you, with ink-stained fingers and steady breath, are part of that weaving. You rise slowly, gathering your mat and tools, the quiet gratitude of the day resting lightly in your heart. The temple corridors are shadowed now, soft lantern light flickering against ancient stone. The world beyond is hushed, waiting. You pause at the doorway, glancing back at the sycamore's silhouette against the night sky. Somewhere, a night bird calls a single, clear note that drifts like a soft benediction as you step into the cool night air. And you carry with you more than words. You carry the gentle rhythm of voice and script, memory and breath-a-calm legacy unfolding, quiet and sure. Beneath the stars, you close your eyes and let the stillness enfold you. The steady cadence of ancient voices guiding you softly toward rest. The early light of dawn slips quietly through the small window of the modest dwelling where you begin your day. The walls made of sun-baked mud brick hold the lingering warmth of the night, and the air carries the faint scent of dried reeds woven into the roof. A gentle breeze moves through the open doorway, stirring the woven mats that lie upon the floor and bringing with it the earthy perfume of tilled soil and ripened barley from the nearby fields. You rise slowly, feeling the coolness of the stone beneath your feet as you step into the soft morning hush. Around you, the household begins to stir, not with sudden movements or loud calls, but with the quiet rhythms of familiar routine. The soft clatter of a clay pot being set upon the floor, the gentle scrape of a wooden paddle stirring a mixture in a shallow basin, the muted murmur of voices your mother, your siblings working together to prepare the day's first meal in the small courtyard outside. The smell of fresh bread mingles with the faint smoke from a cooking fire. You breathe deeply, tasting the warmth of the hearth even before you reach it. Nearby, a handful of freshly picked figs lie on a woven tray, their skins soft and yielding, dusted with the pale bloom of morning dew. The sweetness promises comfort, a quiet luxury amid the simplicity of daily life. Your morning tasks are familiar, simple, unhurried, but essential. You carry a basket to the water jar, the cool ceramic surface smooth and heavy in your hands. The water inside is fresh from the Nile, slightly cool with the memory of night's chill, faintly scented by lotus petals left floating by your mother before the jar was sealed last evening. You pour water into a shallow basin, feeling the gentle splash as it settles, preparing for washing and cooking as you move through the courtyard. The soft clucking of hens accompanies you. Their feathers rustle as they scratch at scattered grain beneath the date palm whose long leaves tremble in the breeze. The warm sun begins to crest higher, filtering through the fronds in dapples of light and shadow. The ground beneath your sandals is dusty and uneven, but worn smooth by generations of small feet. Inside the house, the scent of barley porridge thickens the air, earthy, slightly sweet, with a whisper of cumin and coriander, spices brought by traders from distant lands and now woven into everyday fare. Your mother stirs the bubbling pot with a wooden spoon, her hands steady and sure, her movements slow and deliberate as she adds a pinch of salt. The thick steam rises, carrying the promise of warmth and nourishment. You take your place at the low table, a simple board resting on short legs, its surface worn smooth by use. A small earthenware bowl is set before you, filled with the porridge, dotted with slices of dried dates and a drizzle of honey. The first bite is soft and comforting, the warm grains melting gently on your tongue, the sweetness lingering with a quiet richness. The taste is simple but satisfying, a grounding start to the day. Around you, Your family moves in harmonious rhythm. Your father steps outside, tending to a small plot of vegetables shaded beneath a woven reed canopy. The scent of fresh herbs, mint, dill, and coriander rises faintly on the morning air. Your younger siblings play quietly beneath the fig tree, their laughter low and gentle, like the rustling of leaves. The day's chores follow in steady sequence. You fetch water for the cooking fire, its surface dark and shimmering beneath the rising sun. You help prepare flatbreads, patting the dough with careful fingers, feeling the soft elasticity beneath your palms. The dough is rolled thin and cooked on a flat stone heated by glowing embers, the smell of baking bread mixing with the dry warmth of clay and ash. Each task is accompanied by the subtle, accompanying textures of life, the cool slip of water over your skin, the rough grain of woven mats, the warmth of sunlit stone, the faint crackle of burning wood. The world moves slowly here, not marked by urgency, but by care. Later, as the sun climbs higher and the heat softens, the household gathers in the shade. A shallow basin of water stands ready for washing hands, scented faintly with crushed lotus petals and a pinch of natron for cleansing. You dip your fingers, feeling the coolness wash away the dust and toil of morning labor. The water slips smoothly over your skin, carrying the subtle scent of the river and the earth. Meal times are simple but nourishing. Lentils simmer gently. In a clay pot, their soft texture a quiet contrast to the crusty flatbread broken between fingers. Dates and figs offer bursts of sweetness, their sticky skins cool and yielding. Water is sipped slowly from polished vessels, its touch refreshing in the warmth of the day. Throughout these moments, the rhythm of the household is constant. No rush disturbs the flow, only the soft cadence of breath, speech, and movement. Tasks overlap in gentle harmony. The clink of pottery, the shuffle of sandals, the murmur of voices all combine into a soundscape that soothes rather than stirs. As afternoon approaches, the household settles into a slower pace. Children rest beneath the shade of date palms, their eyelids heavy with quiet fatigue. Your mother prepares herbs for the evening meal, her hands working with practiced ease. It's a scent of thyme and coriander rising in soft waves. You assist by gathering kindling, feeling the rough bark of dry branches and the snap of twigs between your fingers. In these small details, the warm breath of cooking fires, the delicate rustle of leaves, the gentle touch of water on skin, there is a steady comfort. Life here unfolds, not in grand moments, but in the soft weaving of routine, in the patient care given to each day's simple necessities. And as evening draws near, the household gathers once more around the hearth. The air cools gently, carrying the scent of wood smoke and crushed herbs. The sky outside deepens to soft shades of amber and lavender. Stars just beginning to sparkle faintly. You sit quietly with your family, sharing bread and stew, warmth and silence. The day's labors rest now in tired limbs and calm hearts. And as your eyes grow heavy, the steady rhythms of meals, chores, and shared moments settle deep within a gentle lullaby, inviting rest. The soft light of late afternoon pours gently through the woven reed screens of the courtyard, casting elongated, delicate shadows across the sun-baked mud brick walls and the smooth stones beneath your feet. The air is warm, tinged with the faint, dry aroma of crushed dates and parched barley stalks. Somewhere nearby, the slow murmur of the Nile courses softly over rounded stones, its steady whisper a quiet companion to the rhythm of the day. You find yourself drawn to the garden patch tucked beside the house, a small space where herbs and vegetables grow in neat, shaded beds. The leaves of coriander and dill glisten faintly with dew still clinging from an earlier watering. The scent is sharp and fresh, blending softly with the subtle musk of sun-warmed earth and dry straw. Your fingers brush lightly over the tender stems, feeling the texture of each leaf, the cool resilience beneath your touch. Nearby, a woven basket holds fresh vegetables, fat onions with papery skins, deep green leeks, and small clusters of garlic bulbs still dusted with soil. You help your mother prepare the evening meal here, peeling and slicing with careful precision. The knife's smooth blade presses softly against the tender flesh of the vegetables, its rhythmic scrape steady and assured, as the air fills with the gentle scent of crushed herbs and simmering broth. The courtyard grows even quieter, wrapped in the stillness of late afternoon. The city of Memphis, in the heart of ancient Egypt, was alive with noise and motion. Carts groaned under the weight of stone, donkeys brayed as they were led to market, and the smell of bread, fish, and resin drifted through the air. But just beyond, the great temple of Ptah, in a quieter quarter, stood a place that held a different kind of power, not one of chisels and stone, but of ink and words. It was the scribe school, where boys of promise were sent to learn the art that could grant them entry into Egypt's bureaucracy, temples, and courts. Among the narrow streets and whitewashed walls, a young boy named Hori walked nervously. His linen kilt was clean but plain, his hair freshly shaved, save for the side lock of youth that brushed his cheek. He clutched a small pouch with his few belongings: reed pens, a fragment of wood to practice on, and a jar of black ink his father had purchased at no small cost. Today was the first day he would walk through the gates of the scribe school of Memphis. Hori's father was a modest man, a steward in the service of a minor official. He earned little, but he had ambitions for his son. A man who writes, his father often said, is greater than the man who builds. A farmer's back broke in the fields, a soldier's body was thrown into war. But the scribe held his head high, commanding respect through words and numbers. To be a scribe was to be lifted above the dust of labor. Still, Hori's stomach twisted with doubt. He had watched scribes work before quick flicks of the reed pen, steady hands guiding lines across papyrus, strange bird and snake shapes marching in orderly rows. They seemed like magicians who bound speech into symbols. Could he really learn such a craft? The scribe school was part of what the priests called the House of Life. Its whitewashed walls gleamed in the morning sun. An older boy, already a student, waved Hori through the gate. Inside, the air smelled of rush mats, crushed papyrus, and ink mixed with gum. Low benches lined the courtyard, where students bent over wooden tablets. At the far end stood the master, a tall man named Pentu. His robes were simple, but his bearing carried authority. His head was shaved smooth, his eyes sharp. When he spoke, the courtyard fell silent. "Okay, you come here," Pentu said, "to learn the art that outlasts stone. A tomb crumbles, a statue breaks, but writing endures. With your pens, you will measure grain, record taxes, write letters to the king, copy hymns to the gods. Do not think the pen is light. It is heavier than the sword, for it decides what is remembered." Hori bowed low, his chest swelling with both fear and pride. The first lesson was not in words, but in tools. Pentu held up a bundle of reeds, their tips cut at an angle. "This is your weapon," he said, "the reed pen. Treat it with care. Cut it to blunt, and your words will smear. Cut it to sharp, and the papyrus will tear." Each boy was given a reed and a small knife. Hori held his reed nervously, shaving the tip until it was sharp. He dipped it into a small palette of black ink made from soot and gum. Tentatively, he tried to draw a line across his wooden tablet. The stroke wobbled. His neighbor, a boy named Pacer, snickered. Pentu's gaze was sharp. "Your hand trembles because your mind trembles. Be steady. The pen follows the heart." Hori tried again. The line was straighter this time. Small smile tugged at his lips. In the days that followed, Hori's life fell into rhythm. At dawn, he washed and prayed with his family. Then hurried to the school. There, the students sat cross-legged with their tablets, copying signs the master dictated. At first, they practiced simple signs, straight lines, spirals, circles. Then came to hieroglyphs, the owl, the reed leaf, the water ripple, the seated man. Do not merely draw, Pentu reminded them. These are not pictures, they are words. Each sign has a voice. Hori's wrist ached from hours of practice. His fingers stained black from ink. Some nights he dreamed of owls and snakes writhing on the tablet, chasing him through the dark. Yet slowly, the shapes became familiar, his lines more confident. The school was no easy place. Discipline was harsh, for the art of writing demanded order. The boy was careless. Pentu's reed staff rapped his knuckles. If he was late, he copied lines until sunset. Sometimes older students recited proverbs too. Remind them of obedience. The ear of a boy is on his back. He listens when he is beaten. Hori hated that proverb, yet he understood it. The masters believed hardship sharpened skill. Still, there were moments of pride. One afternoon, Pentu inspected their tablets. T paused at Hori's "Your hand. Grow steady," he said. "Keep this path, and your words will flow like the Nile." Hori's cheeks burned with pride. For the first time, he felt he belonged. As months passed, the lessons deepened. Hori learned to copy not only words, but numbers, fractions, grain measures, calculations for fields. He discovered that scribes were more than record keepers. They were the backbone of the kingdom, ensuring the temples ran smoothly, the granaries stayed full, and the taxes flowed to Pharaoh. He also began to copy wisdom texts, proverbs, hymns, and tales of kings long past. The words carried weight, shaping his thoughts. He realized that to be a scribe was not merely to write, but to join a chain stretching back centuries. Each word he copied tied him to the scribes before him. His hands had written the same signs in ages past. One hot afternoon, Pentu gave them a task. Each boy was handed a fresh roll of papyrus and instructed to copy a hymn to Pata without air. "The gods wash through your hand," Pentu warned. "One mistake is an insult." Hori dipped his reed pen, his hand trembling slightly. The first lines flowed well praises to Ptah, creator of craftsmen. But midway through, sweat dripped onto the papyrus, smearing the ink. Panic seized him. He blotted it quickly, tried to rewrite the damaged sign. When Pinto came to inspect, his gaze lingered on the blot. Hori's stomach sank, but the master only nodded. He repaired the error with care. That too is a lesson. Scribes must not only write, but mend. Relief washed over Hori. He bowed deeply. Not all lessons were in ink. Among the boys, friendships and rivalries bloomed. Pacer, the boy who once mocked Hori, often competed with him. Their tablets were compared, their lines measured. Sometimes the rivalry pushed Hori harder. Sometimes it weighed heavy on his heart. But there were friendships too. A boy named Kebi, small and quick to laugh, often shared his ink when Hori's dried out. At night, the boys whispered stories, tales of gods, of Pharaoh, of battles and monsters. They dreamed together of futures as tax scribes, temple recorders, or even royal clerks. Years passed in the school of Memphis. The reed pen no longer felt strange in Hori's hand. His strokes were quick, precise, flowing with confidence. He had learned the proverbs of Tehotep, the hymns to Amen, the calculations of grain. His back bore the memory of Pentu's discipline. But his mind bore something greater, knowledge, the weight of which gave him stature. One day, Pentu gathered the older students. "You are no longer children scratching lines. You are scribes. Remember this, the reed pen is not for vanity, and it is for service to Pharaoh, to the gods, to truth. Hold it as you would hold your life." When Hori walked home that evening, his father met him at the doorway. He looked at the roll of papyrus in his son's hand, the clear hieroglyphs written with care. Tears welled in his eyes. "You have risen above the dust, my son. The pen has made you." Hori smiled. The journey had only begun. But he knew, with ink-stained fingers and steady hand, that he had entered a world where words carried power greater than stone. The Nile whispered against its banks, carrying with it reeds that swayed in the warm Egyptian breeze. Among these reeds grew one of the most important plants of the ancient world, papyrus. For centuries, it was more than just a plant. It was a gift from the river, a craft that carried knowledge, prayers, and trade across generations. To watch papyrus being made was to see a quiet ritual, one born of patience, water, hands that understood the rhythm of the river. The day began before dawn. The air was still cool, and the stars lingered faintly above the palm-lined horizon. Men carrying bronze sickles stepped barefoot into the shallows of the Nile, their linen kilts wet from the morning dew. The papyrus stalks grew tall, often higher than a man's head, green and proud, their feathery umbels swaying like crowns at the top. Harvesters chose the straightest, most supple stems. With practiced motions, they sliced through the stalks near their roots, the blades hissing softly. The cut stems floated briefly on the water before being bundled together with rope. By sunrise, the river was dotted with rafts of papyrus, their emerald green reflections shimmering in the golden light. Each stalk was a promise of scrolls for the temple scribes, letters between merchants, contracts sealed by Pharaoh's officials, and songs of poets yet unborn in the shade of mud brick workshops. The stalks were stacked in tall bundles, ready for transformation. Women and apprentices sat cross-legged on reed mats, knives in hand. With careful strokes, they peeled away the tough outer rind, revealing the pale, spongy pith within. This was the true heart of papyrus, the part that would become the writing surface. The strips cut from it were soft, moist, and fragrant with the faint sweetness of river reeds. Workers dipped their hands into bowls of water, keeping the strips supple so they would not crack. Children ran errands, carrying armfuls of rind away to be dried as fuel for hearths. Nothing of the papyrus went to waste. The tops became garlands. For festivals, the roots could be burned, and the stalks themselves served as boat material. Yet it was the inner flesh that held the greatest secret, the ability to carry words across time. When enough strips had been cut, the artisans laid them flat on a smooth stone slab. The first layer was arranged vertically, strips placed side by side, edges touching like soldiers in a line. A second layer was placed horizontally across them, creating a crisscrossed mat. This lattice was not held by glue or thread. Instead, the natural sap within the papyrus acted as a binding agent. Under pressure, it would fuse the layers into a single sheet. The artisans knew that the plant's own essence was its strength in nature, binding itself into permanence. Some whispered that this was the work of Thoth, the god of wisdom, who had blessed the Nile with this plant so that mankind could learn, record, and remember. The mats of papyrus strips were stacked between linen cloths, then weighted down with heavy stones. The workshop filled with the sound of dripping water as moisture was squeezed from the plant. Apprentices rotated the stacks daily, checking for air bubbles or uneven edges. After several days, the sheets were lifted and placed in the sunlight to dry. The Egyptian sun hardened them into pale ivory panels, smooth to the touch, faintly striped from the strips within. Some sheets glowed almost golden, others carried a greenish hue, depending on the season of harvest. Each finished sheet was trimmed carefully, edges smoothed with a shell or polished stone. When several sheets were glued end to end, they formed a scroll, a rolling river of words waiting to be inscribed. No papyrus was complete without ink and reed pen. The ink was made from soot mixed with gum and water, yielding a deep black that stood boldly against the pale surface. Red ink was made from ochre, used to mark important names or headings. Scribes sharpened their reed pens with knives, shaping the tips into precise nibs. Then, in quiet workshops or temple chambers, they unrolled the papyrus, dipping their pens into ink jars. Each stroke carried divine weight: the decree of a king, the prayer of a priest, the tally of grain from a farmer's harvest. The papyrus did not complain under the pen's pressure. It received each word silently, faithfully. And so, stories, contracts, laws, and poems traveled across Egypt, far beyond by boat and caravan. Papyrus left the Nile's embrace. Greek merchants carried it across the Mediterranean. Roman officials demanded it in bulk for their sprawling empire. In bustling markets of Alexandria, rolls of papyrus lay beside spices, glassware, and ivory, traded as dearly as gold. A single papyrus scroll might carry a philosopher's arguments, a physician's remedies, or a merchant's accounts. To the world, it was more than plant matter. It was civilization pressed thin and rolled tight in the village workshops. The making of papyrus remained a quiet ritual, unchanged for centuries. Its grandfathers taught sons, mothers guided daughters, apprentices watched and learned. Each gesture, cutting, stripping, layering, pressing, was done with patience, as though they knew they were weaving eternity from a river's gift. Even as wars raged, dynasties rose and fell, and foreign rulers claimed Egypt, the papyrus continued to be made. Its craft endured in silence, never hurried, never forgotten. Yet, time has its own script. By the first centuries of the Common Era, other materials began to rival papyrus. Parchment, made from animal skins, proved more durable in colder climates. Later, paper arrived from China, traveling westward along trade routes. Once bustling, papyrus workshops fell quiet. The reeds still grew along the Nile, tall and green, but fewer hands came to cut them. The art of papyrus making, once sacred, dwindled to a memory. But the legacy of papyrus could not be erased. In museums and libraries today, fragments of ancient papyrus still survive contracts signed in careful hieroglyphs. Love poems written in hurried Greek, prayers whispered in Coptic. Though brittle and faded, they carry voices thousands of years old, speaking across time through the river plant. The Nile gave Egypt many gifts: fertile soil, fish, transport. But papyrus was perhaps its most enduring. It allowed the ancient world to remember itself. Without papyrus, the knowledge of Egypt, the kings, the gods, the daily lives of farmers and scribes might have been lost. The craft was quiet, humble, performed in workshops with simple tools. Yet from that silence came the written word, and from the written word came history. Even now, when we write on paper, we echo those artisans of the Nile, those hands that pressed strips of river plant into sheets that carried the wisdom of the world. The Egyptian sun rose slowly over the eastern horizon, gilding the desert sands with a burnished glow and catching the first light on the slow-flowing Nile. Villages along the banks stirred awake with the sounds of donkeys braying, women drawing water, and farmers calling to one another as they prepared for the long day ahead. Yet in one quiet corner of the settlement, behind high mud brick walls, a workshop was already alive with the scratching of stone on stone, the whisper of reeds, and the soft crack of mineral chunks being broken into powders. Here, the craft of color was born. The pigments that would decorate tomb walls, illuminate papyrus scrolls, and breathe life into statues of gods were ground beneath the heat of the pharaoh's sun. The workshop was not grand, yet it carried a sacred air. Its walls were stained with years of work, streaked with red ochre dust and faint traces of green. A large table, carved from limestone, bore the marks of countless hours of grinding. On shelves against the walls lay baskets of minerals, lumps of yellow ochre from the desert cliffs, chunks of malachite with their deep green gleam, bright red hematite, and flakes of the rare blue stone lazurite, imported at great cost from lands beyond the Nile. Young apprentices scurried about, carrying bowls of water from the river, lighting small clay lamps filled with oil, and placing fresh pieces of soft stone onto the grinding slabs. Their arms were dusted with color, as if they themselves were painted beings. Their master, an elderly craftsman with sinewy arms, hardened from decades of labor, stood over the pigments with reverence. For him, each powder was not mere color, was magic. The Egyptians believed that colors carried meaning. Red was the color of power and life, but also of danger. Green meant growth, renewal, and health. Yellow shone like the eternal flesh of the gods, while black represented fertility and the rich soil of the Nile. And blue was the color of the heavens, the lapis sky, where Ra, the sun god, sailed his golden bark. To craft these hues was not only a skill, but an act of devotion. The apprentices worked in the open courtyard, where the sun struck down fiercely. Their backs bent over grinding stones, their arms moving in steady, circular rhythms as mineral. Chunks were broken into finer and finer grains. The master insisted that only under the natural light of the sun could the true tones of the pigments be revealed. Sweat mixed with dust, leaving streaks of red or green across their faces. Each stroke of stone upon stone was a meditation. Sometimes it took hours to reduce a single handful of malachite into the smooth, shimmering green powder that painters demanded. The sound was constant, the scrape of pestles, the hiss of sand against stone, the crunch of crystals breaking apart. The sun watched silently above, as it had for centuries, while below men toiled to capture its light in powders that could outlast even the builders themselves. But color alone was not enough. A pile of fine dust was useless until it could be bound and fixed upon walls, papyrus, or statues. Here lay the deeper secrets of the craft. The masters showed the apprentices how to mix the powders with gum arabic, drawn from acacia trees, which gave the paint its adhesive strength. Sometimes honey was used, its sweetness hidden beneath the weight of stone. For darker shades, soot from the hearth was carefully collected and ground, producing the deep black ink that scribes used to fill papyrus scrolls with hymns, counts, and decrees of Pharaoh. Each bowl was stirred slowly with reed sticks until the powder and binder formed a smooth paste. Only then did the colors awaken, gleaming alive, ready to become the eternal voice of Egypt. The pigments created beneath the sun were destined for greatness. Painters carried them into the tombs of kings, where every wall would be covered in vivid scenes of life, death, and the journey beyond. Farmers tilling the soil, herds of cattle, feasts and dances, all rendered in brilliant hues that seemed to defy the dark. Silence of the tomb. Scribes dipped their reed pens into the black ink born of soot and gum, writing prayers, laws, and stories that would travel across generations. Statues of gods received touches of gold and blue, their eyes bright with kohl, their lips alive with red ochre. The pigments bound together not just color, but belief. To the Egyptians, painting was not merely decoration, it was power. A painted image of a loaf of bread was more than a symbol. It was a loaf, ready to nourish the Ka, the spirit of the dead. A painted figure of a servant could rise to life in the afterworld and serve the tomb's owner for eternity. And so, each grain of pigment mattered. Each hue held weight. Not all pigments were equal. Ochre and yellow ochre could be dug from the cliffs in abundance. Malachite was more precious, its green depths desired for both paint and eye makeup, believed to protect against illness. But the rarest was blue dot. Egypt had no natural blue pigment, and lazurite had to travel from distant Afghanistan, carried across deserts and mountains by traders who risked bandits and storms. To grind such a stone was to touch the sky itself. Yet, because it was so costly, craftsmen sought another way, and so Egyptian blue was born. By heating a mixture of sand, copper, and natron in a hot kiln, they produced a brilliant synthetic blue that shimmered even under torchlight. It was the world's first artificial pigment, a triumph of science and faith. As the sun dipped low, turning the Nile into a ribbon of fire, the apprentices carefully stored the pigments in small clay jars, sealed with mud stoppers. Each jar bore marks to show its contents: red, green, yellow, black, blue. Tomorrow, painters would come to claim them, carrying them off to tombs, temples, papyrus rolls. The workshop quieted, save for the faint chirping of crickets. The master looked upon his apprentices, their arms stained with the work of the day, their faces streaked with dust. He smiled faintly. "Remember," he said, his voice low, "these colors are not yours. They belong to the gods, to Pharaoh, to eternity itself. Treat them with respect, for they will outlast even our bones." The boys nodded, tired but solemn, understanding in their hearts that their labor was part of something vast, something timeless. Centuries would pass, dynasties would rise and fall, the sands would bury temples and palaces. Kate, still, on the walls of the Valley of the Kings, in the tombs of nobles, and on scraps of ancient papyrus, the colors endure. Reds still burn, blues still glow, and blacks remain sharp, as if the craftsmen had only yesterday laid down their tools. Those pigments, born beneath the Egyptian sun, ground with sweat and devotion, had indeed outlasted the bones of those who made them, and so the quiet craft of grinding pigments became eternal and unbroken. Bridge from the hands of forgotten apprentices to the eyes of those who look upon Egypt's wonders today. The House of Life, per Ankh, stood beside the Temple of Ammon in Thebes, like a shadow that refused to fade with time. It was not made to dazzle like the sanctuaries of gods, where incense rose in clouds and priests raised their hands toward the sun. Instead, its walls held a quieter, subtler reverence. Here, silence was prayer, and memory itself was sacred. Inside, beyond the outer halls, where novices hurried with reed pens and jars of ink, there lay the silent room of records. No bells announced its presence. No torch was allowed to blaze too brightly within it. The room breathed in hushed tones, for what it carried was heavier than gold. Scrolls of papyrus, filled with the words of kings, hymns for gods, and knowledge thought too fragile to rest in any living mind alone. Kedi was only 15 when he was first permitted to step inside the silent room. His heart beat against his ribs like a trapped bird. He had spent 3 years in the outer chambers, learning the slow patience of papyrus, cutting, grinding soot for black ink, and shaping reed pens so fine that a single flick could break their tips. Now, the master librarian, a man whose name was whispered like a blessing, Penihasi, beckoned him forward. "Remember, Kedi," Penihasi murmured, his voice lower than the rustle of linen. "You walk not among scrolls, but among spirits. Treat each roll of papyrus as though it breathes, for in truth it does." Kedi swallowed and nodded. Case wiped his linen kilt, wiped his palms on the cloth, and stepped into the chamber that few eyes were ever allowed to see. The silent room was colder than the summer air outside, its thick mud brick walls keeping the desert heat at bay. Narrow windows, high near the ceiling, allowed only slivers of sunlight, enough to trace thin golden stripes across the stacked shelves. Smell was unlike any temple. No incense, no offerings of beer or roasted goose. Instead, it smelled of dry papyrus, of dust gently settling, and of ink that had long ago lost its bite. Scrolls were kept not in chaos, but in a careful rhythm. Wooden racks lined the walls, each slot filled with rolled papyri bound with cords of linen. Tiny clay tags dangled from some, marked with signs of their content: a hymn, a list of offerings, the deeds of a pharaoh, a medical recipe. The oldest scrolls, their edges yellow and brittle, were wrapped in protective cloths, as though swaddled like infants. The silence pressed itself upon Kedi until he felt his very breath might disturb it. Penahasi led him to a shelf and gestured. Here lie the decrees of Nabibata Mentotep, who united the two lands generations ago. Imagine, boy, when his lips first shaped those words, his enemies still walked, his armies still marched. And yet here they remain, bound and waiting, while his bones are dust. Kedi reached out, but his master shook his head. Not yet. First, you must learn the ways of storage. To mishandle is to destroy, and to destroy is to murder the memory of Egypt itself. The ritual of storage was as intricate as any temple sacrifice. A scroll was not simply dropped onto a shelf. It was prepared, honored, and placed with deliberate grace. Kedi watched as Penahasi demonstrated. A scroll of hymns, newly copied, lay upon a wooden table. Penahasi unrolled it a little, checked the neatness of the ink, ensured no letters had blurred, then rolled it back with practiced hands. He smoothed the edges with his palm, tied it with a narrow strip of linen, and attached a tag of soft clay, upon which he pressed a seal. Without the tag, the scroll is a body without a name, he explained. The shelves would become a graveyard without memory. He then carried the scroll slowly, as though bearing an offering dish, and placed it into its appointed niche. The sound of it sliding into its wooden bed was softer than the sigh of a reed in the wind, but it filled Kedi's ears like a thunderclap. Days became weeks. Kedi's tasks grew from sweeping the floor of stray papyrus fibers to preparing tags, finally carrying scrolls under Penahasi's watch. He learned to feel the difference between a strong papyrus and one that had begun to weaken at the edges. He learned how the ink of lampblack differed from that made with red ochre, and why both must be kept in certain balance within the records. At times, other scribes entered, their heads bent low, their sandals removed, so their steps made no sound. They consulted records when temples required old hymns, or when physicians sought forgotten remedies for illness. Kedi realized then that the scrolls were not dead. No, they were living mouths that spoke across centuries, waiting only for the right question. Still, nothing struck him more than the silence. Unlike the noisy courtyards where students argued over hieratic signs, unlike the bustling kitchens where servants clattered dishes, here silence seemed woven into the walls. Penahasi once told him, "Listen, and you will hear the scrolls themselves whispering." And indeed, some nights Kedi thought he did. One evening, as the setting sun painted the temple walls red, Penahasi summoned Kedi privately. Upon the table lay a scroll older than any Kedi had seen. Its linen wrapping was worn thin, its clay tag crumbled. This, Penahasi said, was written in the reign of Djoser, long before the kings, you know. It is a treatise on stone and spirit, meant only for the eyes of the high priests. Tonight, we renew its wrappings. Kedi's breath caught, to touch a scroll older than even his grandfather's grandfather's grandfather was to hold time itself. Together, they unwrapped it, brushed away grains of dust, and examined the faint ink. Some lines had faded, others survived sharp and clear, as though the scribe's hand still lingered. Penahasi's voice grew reverent. Without this room, boy, this knowledge would be ash. A man dies, but words written rightly can live 1,000 lifetimes. Kedi nodded, but in his heart, all became something deeper, a quiet devotion, as though he himself had joined the priesthood of silence. It was rare to remain after dusk, but one night, Ketty was asked to guard the room while Pinahasi joined a temple procession. Oil lamps flickered along the shelves, their glow soft, their smoke faint. Alone, Ketty sat cross-legged on the floor, listening to the stillness. At first, fear crept in the thought of tomb spirits, of curses. Yet, as he gazed at the hundreds of scrolls resting in their niches, calm spread over him. He imagined each scroll breathing in unison, their words humming together like a great choir, too soft for mortal ears. He whispered aloud, "If I am quiet enough, will you speak to me?" The silence answered, but Ketty felt it not as emptiness, but as presence. He knew then that he belonged to this place. Seasons passed. Floodwaters rose and fell on the Nile. Harvests filled the granaries, and still the silent room kept its vigil. By the time Ketty turned 17, he had become one of its guardians, trusted to handle even the oldest papyri. His hands were steady now, his reverence matured into discipline. He came to understand that storing scrolls was not simply an act of preservation, but one of protection. Fire could devour, insects could gnaw, careless hands could erase what centuries had preserved. His task was not merely to store words, but to guard the very memory of Egypt against time itself. And he knew, as Pinahasi reminded him, that if one scroll were lost, a piece of Egypt's soul would vanish with it. Years later, when Ketty himself had grown into the master of the silent room, called his first steps into that chamber, he would watch the new novices, their eyes wide with awe, their hands trembling as his once had. And he would tell them, as Pinahasi had told him, "You walk not among scrolls, but among spirits." For the silent room of records was not simply a storage hall. It was Egypt's memory, held in fragile papyrus and in the reverent silence of those who kept it. And as long as its guardians remembered their duty, Egypt itself would never forget who it was.